My guest today was recently at White Sox spring training, so let's get some observation of what is going on in Arizona on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert at SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Courtney Finnicum of Baseball Isn't Boring was at White Sox spring training last week, and she joined me to talk about the decision to demote Coulson Montgomery, the front office likely trading Luis Robert Jr. before opening day, what else she saw at spring training, and why Mike Clevinger being on the Sox is gross to some, especially in the female portion of the Sox fan base. All right, Courtney, thank you for joining me. Were you surprised Coulson Montgomery already got sent down to minor league camp so quickly?
I was. I was under the impression that, ever since really winter meetings and Sox Fest, that Colson had a shot at breaking camp with the team. I think we all kind of thought that. As much as Chris Getz has added on a lot of infield depth, he didn't really cover the shortstop position. So we all thought there was a position for Colson to come up right away. And the fact that he had this back injury, which obviously set him back a little bit, and the fact that they really didn't allow him to, kind of work through that before sending him down, kind of showed me a lot about what maybe they're thinking about his development. And it is a little concerning. So I was shocked, and I'm also a little bit concerned about how they're viewing him right now.
Yeah, I mean, a part of me thinks, wouldn't it just make more sense if this is the second back issue, and the scouting reports all keep saying he's probably not going to be a shortstop at the
Yep.
major leagues. Maybe move him to a different position. I don't know.
Well, I do want to touch on the Colson Montgomery potential move to another position. People are talking about third base with Montgomery. And one thing that really stood out to me at Sox Fest was how filled out he's been. He added on a lot of muscle mass. But what concerns me is that he did just turn 23 and he's had these nagging back issues. I mean, as we all know, that shortened Joe Creedy's career by significantly. So, a guy that's already kind of struggling with this and potentially moving to third, it's pause for concern for sure. So, kind of moving forward, I will be curious how they go about his development. I just will. I mean, there's stuff to pay attention to.
Did you get to see Colson do like any work off to the side, like on a field? Because I know he was doing some work potentially. I don't know though if you got a chance to see him when you were down there.
So the day that I was there at Camelback was last Thursday, and he was allegedly going to do this B game, and he ended up not doing the B game, and the White Sox gave kind of some convoluted answer as to why that didn't happen. But I didn't unfortunately get to see him as they were still kind of rehabbing him, I guess. But yeah, it's been a little peculiar, I will say. And it's been a little disappointing. But hopefully he tears it up, April and May, and then hopefully after Memorial Day they bring him up, right? I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, the funny thing though is I saw like someone, I think it was James Fox of Future Sox, make the observation: don't have Colson then play in the cold in April, but then they're going to ask Luis Robert Jr. to play in the cold. Now, obviously, you're not going to demote Luis Robert Jr., but they're taking a huge, conservative with Colson Montgomery. But for your biggest trade asset, wouldn't you think you might want to maybe play Luis Robert Jr. at DH a little bit more than in the cold weather, or maybe in left or right? I mean, because it sounds like he wants to play center a lot.
And it does. And, I have actually had this discussion with a lot of White Sox people. I am still thinking they trade Luis Robert before they break camp. And I feel like the fact that Luis has had a nice spring so far has kind of already enhanced his trade value a little bit. That was my impression kind of in the winter meetings, that they were thinking of moving him kind of like a Dylan C. Steele, where it happened like the last few days of spring training, because I think they know that if this guy continues to hit in the dog days of spring, that they could potentially move him for a little bit more than what they were hoping for. I think they know coming to Chicago, April and May, where it's still pretty cold, there's a risk for an injury and a risk for a struggle. So I'm still waiting for that to potentially happen. But, as far as bringing him north where it's going to be cold, yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge risk there. And I think, you know, if he continues to tear it up during the spring, I would try to move him. I would try to move him before any of that happens.
Well, you were at Reds camp. Did you happen to talk to your friend Terry Francona, get him to finally say, you know what, we should probably bring him in because they're still the ideal team to trade
Yeah.
Luis Robert Jr. to?
Well, and I heard through the grapevine when I was at Reds camp that the Sox were asking for their very, very, very top prospects. Number one prospect they were asking for. And obviously they're not going to get that for Luis Robert at this day and age. So I think the White Sox need to be a little bit reasonable and understanding of what they have. And I still think the Reds could make a good trade partner, but they have to be reasonable with what they're asking for.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up too with Luis Robert Jr. maybe trying to trade him before opening day. I mean, because on one end you have to have a trade partner, but on the
Yes.
other is there is that huge risk of you got to get through April because they're going to play. I think what is it? Pretty much the entire month of April in the Midwest. I don't think they go
Yes.
out west or even go south until late in the year. I mean, late in that in the month. So that's a huge concern. So I agree. It's just outside of the Reds. I mean, I don't know who else is going to come up with $15 million. I don't know if you heard anything else when you were down there, because I know you got your ear to the ground down there. I don't know if the Mariners, hey, they had an injury.
I was
Maybe.
just gonna call out the Mariners. And the Mariners have recently, Justin Turner, he kind of called them out. He called them out and he said, why is this team wasting the good pitching that they have? Why aren't they looking for a big bat? And I feel, and I've always said this, I think Luis Robert would make make sense with that team. They give him a little bit of a spark. They need someone in that lineup. If he can stay healthy, it's a very good fit. I like the Mariners potentially, but I still see the Reds. I still see them potentially getting involved if the Sox can come down with what they're asking for.
Yeah, and also the Mariners might be an ideal fit though for what the White Sox are asking for, because again with their system, it's so like they got 7 or 8 guys in the top 100. They might be able to move a couple guys
Yeah.
off and not have the White Sox pay any of his salary. Where the Reds, again, I'm with you. They're the ideal team in my opinion because they've got those 3 guys at A ball that they could easily move off of and not worry. Did they give up too much technically? But on the same end, it sounds like they're on the other end, they're being unrealistic and they want the White Sox to pay some of his salary. And it's like he is only making $15 million. That is relatively affordable.
And that is a bargain for what Luis Robert could potentially bring to the table if he's healthy, right? I mean, we all expect at this point, if he can stay healthy, a 40 home run season from Luis. I mean, he's got that capability, but it's these injuries. It's the fact that he'll hit a double and we got to hold our breath that he's gonna pull up with a potentially torn hamstring or a pulled hamstring. I mean, there's always that possibility with him. And as much as it's exciting that he's, doing well during spring training, I'm not convinced that this will translate to April and May out here, which is why I think they could pull that trigger quicker than we think.
Yeah, and especially when he said also, when I play in April, my muscles tighten up. I mean, that was
Yep.
very concerning to me too, where I'm like, well,
Very.
he's admitted that he could stretch himself out as much as he can, because I know everybody complains about, well, what is, is he not stretching? But he's even said, well, it's usually my pull when he has these pulled injuries, it's in April,
Right.
the wrist injury obviously was a different time. That's a totally different thing. So you were down in Arizona. Hopefully you had a great time down in
Yes.
Arizona. Who did impress you in camp?
So the guy that's really standing out to me is Kyle Teal. I think Kyle Teal I think arguably he's the best catcher right now in the organization. It's not even close. One thing that I like about him, besides his defense, which is very appealing, I like the fact that he has some speed. I think for a catcher, that's kind of appealing. That's not something you hear too often when it comes to catchers. And I got a chance to talk to him during Sox Fest, and I asked him about his speed. And I go, do you have any stolen base goals? And he goes, I'd love to have 20 stolen bases. So I thought that was kind of cool that he's thinking about getting on base and stealing some bases. Like, I like that in a catcher. And I think that he has shown a lot of pop, which is something we have not had behind the dish in a long time. So I'm excited for him as a lot. And I also feel like we have, and I'm knocking on wood here as we speak, we have some young arms that we can be excited about. I think Shane Smith, right? Shane Smith. I think he has shown a lot of potential. I think he has really kind of stepped up. there's been a lot of young arms that I'm just like, okay, if these guys stay healthy, there's potential here. So that's been exciting to see. Obviously, the obvious guys of Schultz and Hagen Smith, but this could be a formidable staff in the next couple years.
All right, need to take a quick time out for those listening to the audio version of this episode, but more with Courtney Finnicum of Baseball Isn't Boring is coming up next on Locked On White Sox. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. And my wife and I were trying to eat more heart healthy, and I was munching on some recently. Told my wife to give these babies a try. She loved them. I like the roasted and salted flavor, since it's a perfect blend of roasted and salted, so you don't feel thirsty after eating them. I also love the honey roasted. It's got the perfect taste for the honey of honey. These bees that they found to make that honey, they're amazing because it got a great taste, and it's also a great quick snack too with the no shell options. I don't have to clean them up around my desk here. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get cracking and get snacking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. I like how you brought up Teal, because I was actually going to ask you about him, seeing him. Do you think he has made it pretty much really hard for them to, because they had a little bit of wiggle room to get out from Montgomery, even though they didn't have a good cover at catcher? They obviously gave themselves some professional coverage in Matt Thaiss and Corey Lee, but he has been hitting very, very well in spring training, to the point where it almost seems like it might be impossible for them to send him down to AAA, because the only reason why you might want to send him to AAA is just, hey, can you work out in the outfield? Can you work out at first? Can you get some reps at DH? Maybe catch here and there, and then we'll bring you up. But he's making it really hard, isn't he?
He's making it extremely hard. And not only do they have, Matt Thaiss, but they also have Omar Narvaez too, right? So they do have some veteran presence that I personally don't have any, I don't need to see any of those guys play, to be honest with you. To me, I'm very big on these young guys coming up and playing. I was very big into Colson Montgomery coming up and playing. I know that was controversial on White Sox Twitter, but to me, I feel like, all these years of minor league camp, it's a little underrated sometimes. And I feel like bringing up all these young guys to kind of work out the kinks and get the experience at the major league level when there's really no pressure or expectations to win right now, I think there's some benefits to that. So a guy like Kyle Teal, why not? Why not bring him up and see what he can do? I don't see why not.
Yeah, and I made the case. I went either. In the case of Coulson, I went either way. In the case of Teal, I have no problem if he's up or down. If he's up, because he has already shown that the next step is really for him to hit at the big leagues. He doesn't have those question marks of hitting 214 at AAA, where Coulson, it's like he's trending towards maybe bust. We don't know, because he hit 18 home runs. He had a decent OPS, not a great OPS. Where Teal, it is like, okay, the only reason why he does need to go to the minors is maybe you just want him to shag some fly balls where it won't hurt your win-loss record. But if he shags fly balls in the outfield and he misses, the worst, it's a double, that type of stuff. Because I think you can at least still have Lee and Thaiss on the roster to manage the pitching staff, as you have Teal maybe do maybe 1 or 2 games a week and that type of stuff. That's just where I'm coming from on that one. So I fully agree with you on that one.
And I actually did hear at camp last week that pitchers really like throwing to Matt Thaiss. So, that's got some appeal there, right? I mean, if the pitchers like throwing him and he's a good framer, I think there's some benefit there with the veteran presence. If they're not going to bring up Kyle Teal and it's kind of a tandem of Thaiss and Corey Lee to start the year, I think that's okay too. I mean, if the pitchers feel comfortable with these guys, I'm all for that as well.
But you sparked a question that I didn't prepare here, but let's circle back though to the shortstop, because they did not leave themselves professional coverage. I mean, yes, you have Chase Mydroth, but He's got cramping now in his legs. I mean, who told shouldn't somebody tell him to drink some water in Arizona?
Especially in Arizona. Come on.
Yeah,
Come on.
I know it's a dry heat, but come on.
But
But
still.
his range is limited defensively. I don't know if you've seen that when you've watched the games, when either in person or on the few times it's on TV.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and then also Brooks Baldwin. He's okay, but they really there's nobody there where you could say like Matt Thaiss. Let's say Matt Thaiss. He could still potentially even have small trade value, even if it's a player to be named later.
I agree.
Teams always need a backup catcher. Shortstop,
agree.
there's nobody to showcase. This isn't like Josh Rojas, which they might actually have to start at shortstop.
They might. And honestly, that's the reality, is that they really did not prepare the shortstop position if Coulson wasn't ready. So, I mean, do they go with a Jacob Amaya at short, or God forbid a Leanin Sosa? I mean, I don't want that. But I feel like we're going to be seeing some games early in April with Sosa at short, and strap it down. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people getting fooled by his spring training. I don't see it with him. I just don't. No offense to him. It's not like I have a personal vendetta, but I feel like we're being fooled with that. And I think there might be a hole up the middle for a little bit, and that's gonna suck.
And it's definitely going to suck because the whole plan is get weak contact. I mean, because they don't have a
Yes.
lot of strikeouts. I mean,
Yep.
Shane Smith, as you saw, brought up, it's impressive, but who knows if he's even going to make the rotation, just because they might not need a fifth starter. Obviously, he's going to make the team. He's a Rule 5 pick,
Exactly.
but you don't need a fifth starter till mid-April, and maybe Drew Thorpe is back by then. Did you get any updates on Drew Thorpe on when he might be back?
Yes, I did hear that Drew Thorpe is aiming for a mid-April comeback. Obviously barring any setbacks, barring any injuries. I feel like obviously they're going to keep him back towards the end of spring training, but that he'll be back mid to late April. He is feeling well. Knock on wood, knock on wood. But I do think of potential mid to late April for Drew is reasonable.
All right, so who looked the weakest when you were down in Arizona?
I mean, and it's not a surprise, but Joey Gallo absolutely looks lost. He looks lost. And I get in their minds why they signed him. I get it. But he looked exactly like I thought he would look. He's got a huge long swing, just looks completely lost at the plate, lost a step defensively, just not the guy. And I am worried that they are going to actually have him start with us in April, because he's a veteran and there's not a lot of veterans on this team. So I'm holding my breath that that's going to happen because of the lack of veterans on this team. And they think they can catch lightning in a bottle. He'll run into one, a couple games in April, but he looks absolutely terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but he's going to get the honorary Mike Moustakas should have
Yes.
retired. And I love Mike.
So do I.
Got a relation. I know the guy. He's got somewhat of a relation to my nieces and nephews. It's
Oh,
weird.
wow.
I don't want to explain it too much because it gets really confusing.
A lot
On
of
that,
moving parts.
there is okay, really quick. What
Yeah.
it is it's my brother-in-law, his cousin, and he's best friends with his cousin. His cousin was the best man in their wedding. That he is Mike Moustakas' father-in-law. So
Oh, wow.
that's
Okay.
the connection there. So yes, I've gotten to go to dinner with Mike one time.
Very nice.
Family. He was very lovely. He was his wife is just a doll. She was very nice to my sister when she was battling cancer, all that stuff.
Oh my goodness, that's great. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But at the same point, he should have retired and not even come to the White Sox last year. And it seems like
Correct.
that's the same thing with Joey Gallo. He
Yeah.
should not even be there. And I'm with you that because I think Will Venable wants some left-handed power, and he's one of the few guys in camp that can provide left-handed power.
I agree. I agree. I don't want it to happen, but I feel like it will happen. And another guy that I think is showing a little bit of spark, but I don't know if it will last, is Brandon Drury. I think I do think he'll make this team. Whether he lasts on this team, I mean, that's to be determined. He could be, if he can last, he can be another interesting trade piece in July. But he's had a nice spring, and I don't see why he wouldn't break camp with the team.
Were you disappointed that Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith got sent to minor league camp so quickly? Because I know I was.
I was extremely disappointed in that. I was actually shocked. I was at Camelback Ranch when that news hit, and I had Hagen Smith lined up for an interview, and they told me, they're like, "Yeah, we just sent him down, and we usually give him the day off." And I'm like, "Wonderful, thanks." But yes, besides my personal issues, yes, I was disappointed in that. I would have liked to have seen them get at least one more start, before that happens. But it's the White Sox, right? I mean,
We
they
can't have
do
nice
things.
things. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just saying we
No,
can't have nice things.
we can't have
Yeah.
nice things, and we know that. We know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I was disappointed too. Like at least when they sent Braden Montgomery down, you can still bring him up technically for late inning at bats like they did today. All right, yeah, well, we're recording on Tuesday night, but that. But yeah, I was like, man, we really just can't have nice things. And then they had to send Grant Taylor down too. Like, well, why can't we just have a few more a few more weeks?
That was another guy. I actually had a conversation with Scott Merkin about Grant Taylor. And if they kind of wanted to do something kind of fun and exciting for the fans, they could have brought up Grant Taylor because he's a guy that looks like he's been throwing. He looks like he's a veteran. The presence that he has on the mound, like that could have been kind of an exciting move to get the fans like, okay, like we're kind of seeing a little bit of the future here. That would have been a guy that they could have potentially brought up for opening day the roster. So that was another guy that really impressed me in person. So I think that's a name to watch to potentially be brought up this year at some point.
Yeah, I would like to see them. I mean, I think he's going to be one of the three guys that leads the team back to competitiveness in the rotation.
Yes,
But actually, just hearing that is it makes sense to actually have him start in the bullpen because
that's
he
right.
was actually pretty effective at the end of the games out of the bullpen throwing 100. And you know what? They did the same thing with Garrett Crochet.
That's the exact example we use. Have him break camp, have him be in the bullpen, and kind of do on the fast track of a Garrett Crochet. I think that would have actually gotten some fans excited.
Some Twitter prospect gurus though are about to lose their mind because they're going to be like, "Oh, how he only pitched like 4 games at A ball and that," but it's
Yep.
like, but Garrett Crochet. That's
and
all I
and
gotta
s-
say.
and sometimes guys just have it, and that minor league experience is overrated. I think we are seeing that more and more with teams bringing up their prospects early. And I get that we're not programmed to like think that, oh, they've only spent a month in a month down in single A. But you know what, if they're ready, they're ready, and we got to trust the scouts, right? I mean, we've revamped the team, we've revamped the organization. Trust what they're seeing. And I do think Grant is the kind of guy you could start him in the bullpen and that would be okay.
So, what were your impressions of Will Venable running his first spring training as the manager? Obviously,
Yeah.
other guys do the scheduling and that type of stuff. He doesn't have to do that stuff anymore, but just kind of
Correct.
running the team, running the clubhouse.
He seems, from everything that I've heard, the players really like him. They respect him. The fact that he's a younger guy, I think that's relatable to a lot of guys. Gives good answers, doesn't BS, pretty direct. I think, I think that this was the best move for the Sox with what they had available. Compared to Pedro, who kind of, I still will argue he didn't exactly know what he was getting into when he took this job. I think Will has an idea, and I think he's willing to work around the parameters and what he has and be able to develop. He knows that yes, there needs to be improvements this year, but the focus is on the future. The focus is on 2026 and beyond, and I think he has that mindset. And I think he's solid. I think that's a good move.
I think Pedro Grafal would have survived had he not worked for Ned Yost, because I think he came in being like Ned Yost
Yep.
and without knowing that Ned actually was a decent rebuild manager or setting
Yep.
a standard. He was just terrible when it came to he thought he knew more than everybody. And I think Pedro took a lot of what he saw in Ned, the bad stuff of Ned, and kind of put that into his managing style. And that was just a recipe for disaster because Ned Yost only has a World Series ring because of the great team that the Kansas City Royals had. It wasn't because of Ned Yost. I'll tell you that.
Canadios had the most perfect Royals team, really the most perfect. I use that Royals team as like my parameters for what I want a baseball team to look like. I still do. I still do. Incredible pitching, great defense. Give me that all day long. Timely hitting. They did all the little things right. So yes, Ned Yost was lucky to have that kind of team. And I don't want to disparage the guy completely,
No.
but the team is what 99% of the success was because of that team. And I feel like Pedro was not set up for the challenges that this White Sox team had. Obviously some leadership challenges. That was a fractured clubhouse. I don't think he really grasped that. I just think he took over a mess that he didn't really fully understand. And now that, Will kind of has sort of a clean slate, he's a lot of that core is gone. The organization is kind of refocused a little bit, and he sort of has a team that he can work with now. And I think it's better suited.
Yeah, and I think Will Venable also is just better suited because he played the game where
Yep.
Pedro, also to bring up Ned Yost, Pedro would have been better maybe if there was already a tailor-made team and he just needed to lead it in a way of
Exactly.
fill out the lineup card, do those types of little things, yell at the ump, bad call, that type of things. Whereas, yeah, Will Venable can actually tell these guys, hey, I've been in your shoes. I
Yep.
know what it's like to go through an 0 for 20 slump. I know what it's been to have the highest highs. And also, he might be more qualified as a front office man than Chris Getz. And
Yep.
I'm okay
Yes.
with Chris Getz right now, but 1 year at Theo Epstein's side, that makes you probably more qualified than half the general managers in the league.
And he's also, he's a Princeton grad too. He's extremely well educated. And one thing that I liked about Will Venable, I did interview him right when he was first hired. And I asked him about his father. So, obviously his father was a former major leaguer. But besides that, his dad also played, in Japan. He played in the Dominican. So I asked him about, and Will would travel with his dad. He was in the clubhouses with his father at a young age. So I asked him about his dad and what he saw when he was a kid, and his eyes lit up talking about it. He goes, the things I saw growing up, I saw good conversations, but I also saw bad conversations. And I saw how to handle those at a very young age. And when he said that, I'm like, okay, like that's kind of cool that he's understanding, hey, there's good, but there's also like an accountability factor. And he actually said to me in that same sentence, accountability is one of my favorite words. And I said, that's all I have to hear because that was an issue with the last guy. So that's a big deal.
Another time out here for those listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. But after the break, Courtney discusses why Mike Clevinger coming back is perceived to be gross and almost makes some women feel resentful toward the organization. Get the supplies you need from the site for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5, that's SH5, for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so I'm not going to ask you to speak for all womanhood, but I loved your tweet a couple weeks ago about how you were resenting the White Sox for bringing Mike Clevinger back because, again, that just ickiness with all the past, domestic abuse out. We have to say allegations because he was never charged. He was never charged. He was never suspended, even though he agreed to counseling.
I'm rolling my eyes, but yes, we have to say that, of course.
We have to say these things. And also because apparently the Clevinger bros are very sensitive people.
Very sensitive.
And they hide behind screen names. Put your name on it. That's all I'm going to say.
And your face. Your name and your face. That's all I ask for. Yep.
But can you just give like at least the female perspective of again, why is it just so gross to have Mike Clevinger on this team?
The fact that the White Sox are the only organization that has taken a chance on this guy in the last 3 years. And I am not going to throw anybody under the bus with what I know and what I've heard, but I've heard from a very good source of exactly what kind of guy Mike Clevinger is. That is all I'll say. I will not ever, give names in that regard. I was given information, and that's as far as I'll go. But I do take offense to people tweeting at me about a guy just because he had allegations and he was never found guilty. That doesn't mean crap. It doesn't. And it's a shame because the White Sox actually, after losing 121 games, did have some decent momentum going into this season. They've revamped the front office. Will Venable came in. He was by far the best option that they had. They made some, decent moves with the draft and these young guys coming in. And to now add on Clevinger at the last minute again. And again, I want to remind everybody, the very first time they signed this guy, he pitched pretty damn well. And they put him on waivers and nobody wanted him. That is all you have to know. There were plenty of teams in that year, in that season, that could have used the Mike Clevinger with the way he was throwing, and they decided not to. So trust me, the jig is up about Mike Clevinger. The league knows it. And it's unfortunate that the Sox are just deciding to overlook it because he has relationships with certain people in the front office. It's a shame. It's gross. More than likely, I see this guy making the team in some sort of bullpen capacity. And that's really disappointing because, as we know, a lot of strong women on White Sox Twitter, a lot of good baseball fans. And the fact that we have to, once again, deal with this guy on our team is a real shame.
Yeah, and also I want to know where the heck does he get that he thinks he's going to be the closer? Because he keeps talking about being the closer, and even Will Venable has said, we're not even good enough to get to being a closer. We just got to get, because I agree with you. I mean, in terms of the performance, he got through a clean inning. Yep. He does have some track record, but he's also going to be hurt at some point. That's another thing. But where is he getting that he thinks he's going to be the closer? Because he keeps talking about being the closer.
And he does. And, to Will Venable's credit, he has said, listen, I don't think we are in any position to name a closer at this point. I thought a guy like a Baroa, I thought maybe he could be a closer. But of course, here comes Mr. Tommy John. But I feel like I don't know where that's getting in his head. And it worries me that somebody within the organization is kind of pushing that, like, hey, let's make this guy a closer. He can last one inning. And that concerns me that is going to be the case. So I'm holding my breath when it comes to the Clevinger stuff, because I just feel like, for whatever reason, this team is hell-bent on shoving this guy down our throats. So I wouldn't put it past them in the closer role. I would not.
All right, finally, is Justin Ishbia going to be the White Sox owner at some point in, say, the next 5 years?
If Jerry Reinsdorf dies in the next 5 years, perhaps, but not when Jerry's still alive.
Well, Courtney, again, where can we find all your great content?
Anywhere you get your podcast from. It is through Odyssey, so Baseball Isn't Boring. Look me up on YouTube and everywhere else you get your podcasts.
All right, Courtney, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you as always.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB fantasy draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss if MLB is trying to force out the Rays owner. Maybe it should do the same with Jerry Reinsdorf. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with Courtney Finnicum of Baseball Isn't Boring. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.